New polling that shows voters from both major parties are in agreement on something, that our country's democracy is under attack. For those numbers, let's bring in longtime campaign strategist and executive director of Georgetown's Institute of Politics and Public Service, Mo Elleithee. And Mo, what are you finding, especially given this latest story? It's a question of civility versus division.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and this story we're talking about is a great example of this. Americans are pretty unified in their concern that democracy is under attack. Our poll reinforces what we're seeing in a bunch of other polls on that fact. But where we're seeing more and more division is why. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a correlation between partisanship, where people get their information, and why they think democracy might be under attack. Now, there are a couple of reasons. We tested a number of different reasons why people say democracy is being threatened. There are a couple of them that people overwhelmingly agree is a bad thing for democracy, like an increasing threat of political violence, an erosion of civility and respect in politics. People agree across the ideological spectrum. But maybe one of the most stark examples of this is the conversation over voting. Mm-hmm. Democrats overwhelmingly believe that voter suppression and voter suppression and intimidation is a threat to democracy. Republicans, not so much. On the flip side, Republicans overwhelmingly believe that voter fraud is a huge threat to democracy. Democrats and independents don't really see that. And so what we're seeing is that while everyone believes democracy is under threat, they tend to blame the other side. They tend to not agree on why. And our argument is that until we begin to truly understand some of those distinctions, we're going to have some trouble reestablishing trust in our institutions.
Hey, Mo, it's Heilman here. I'm looking at one of the results of the poll, which is the list of extreme and very serious threats to our democracy. Again, playing on the same theme you were just talking about a second ago. So increasing violent behavior, 74%. I'm going to bet that's overweighted towards overwhelmingly driven by Democrats who say that the violent behavior is on the part of right-wing nationalist agitators. But the second thing under there is something we've also been talking about. Biased news coverage. 67% is number 2. In the list of extreme and very serious threats to our democracy. I'm going to hold up the cover of the New York Post here very briefly. New York Post, has got this. There's Hunter Biden. This is the story that we're talking about in another way. Donald Trump talking about collusion between big tech, the mainstream media, and the Democrats, and then the Biden crime family in particular, as he likes to call it. That's what the right sees, right? They think that the threat to democracy, at least very high on that list, is us, basically, that we're the problem. And I want to get at that with you, kind of to see how the liberals think about that issue, how does the other side think about it, and what do we do with that problem when you have something that's a very high-ranking threat to democracy that both sides agree, but they don't agree about what the substance of the threat actually is?
Well, it's interesting when you break down the crosstabs on that question. We tested 2 different questions on this that we thought were really interesting. The biased news coverage, you see 2/3 of the country believe that that's a serious threat to democracy. It's driven primarily by incredibly high numbers among Republicans and pretty high numbers among independents, a little bit less by Democrats. Democrats still think it's a problem, but not nearly to the same extent that Republicans do. On the flip side, we also asked, how big of a problem do you think social media that reinforces what you already believe is, or what people already believe is? How big of a threat is that to democracy? Again, pretty significant. Almost 2/3 of the country believe that that is a serious threat to democracy, but that is driven primarily by overwhelming numbers by Democrats and some independents, and less so, still a majority, but far less of a majority of Republicans. So again, people are not only breaking down along partisan lines, but where they get their information, how they get their information. Again, believing that not only are the sources of information biased, but then accepting the biases that reinforce the concerns they already have.
Georgetown University's Mo Elleithee, thank you very much.